I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. And this week we're going to talk about one of my favourite things, vintage chisels. What to look for, what to avoid, and how to get them back into working order. So, let's roll the intro. So, as a birthday present to myself, I bought literally a shoebox full of old chisels. And these are all in different levels of repair. Some will need very little, some will need a lot of work. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to go through with you what I see here when I'm looking for vintage tools, particularly chisels, and what to avoid. So, let's get down and have a look at some of these. So here we have the two sets of chisels that I bought. They're two separate sets. So on the right here, we have a set of wooden handle chisels. Now these are older. My estimation would be they would date from probably the late 19th, early 20th century. Some of them. These ones here are newer on the right hand side, but they're still relatively old. Now why would you buy older chisels when you can get newer chisels? Well, there's two reasons. One, generally the quality to steel in older chisels is better, but the other thing is, if you compare it to a modern chisel, which I have here, what often happens now is that only a certain proportion of the blade is actually hardened. This makes the manufacturing process easier, and that means that you don't get quite as long out of your blade. So if you buy a chisel like this, which is a Sorby, you could sharpen that up to here and still have a usable chisel. So that's just why I tend to go with that, but the same could apply to newer chisels. So on the left here we have a collection of old marble and footprint chisels. Now these are probably from in or around the 1970s to 1990s. And again, these will be fully hardened so you can keep going. You can see there's quite a lot gone off this one and it still holds an edge. So that would be the reasoning behind buying vintage tools, and also vintage tools are often slightly less expensive. So let's get down then to what to look for and what to avoid. So here we have an example of what I would look for. So the handle is still relatively intact. Now handles are easy to replace, but if you have a handle that's really badly broken, chances are the chisel has been used for stuff it shouldn't be used for. The other thing then I want to look at here is to see if there's rust or if there's visible signs of mistreatment. So you can see here that the bevels are still nice and sharp, whereas on this one you can see in the light that those bevels are pretty much all gone. That means that somebody went at this probably with a sander to take away any rust and didn't really pay attention to what they were doing, so chances are it hasn't been as maintained as it should be. You can see here on the back I've already done a bit of work to remove some of the pitting, but those are still gone. The back of the chisel is very, very important, because that's where the bulk of the work that you're going to have to do if you have to maintain it will be done. So I always, if there's no images at the back, I'll always ask for images. And what you're looking for is something like this. You want a smooth back with minimal pitting. That means you can get a really nice sharp edge. So let's say, for example, and I am a glutton for punishment, we compare it with this one where you can see that there is pitting right to the very end, and then we look at the front and we can see there's a lot of rust, a lot of damage. This is going to require quite a lot of work. I'm going to have to cut nearly an inch off this chisel just to get a usable chisel out of it. That's a lot of work. The other thing you want to look at on the back is, can you see around? So this is a slight example, but you will visibly see it. So you can see there on the back, you can see the line shining here. That means that when someone was flattening the back, they did this. So rather than having a flat face here and an angled face, we now have two angled faces. So I'm either going to have to machine the back down here to get that back to a point, or cut that much off the chisel. Now this is a fairly light example. You could see this coming back an inch or 2 inches. So unless you're confident in doing that kind of work, avoid chisels with a very visible scoop on the back or very visible bevel on the back. Now I started with the sort of more detailed stuff. The obvious things you want to avoid is something like that, where there's a big monking chunk gone out of the chisel. The back is in crap. You know, if you were in a car boot sale, you couldn't offer someone more than a couple of cents for that. Now I bought these all as a lot, and I will eventually get this one in order, but obviously the more damage is up here, the more work you're going to have to do. So now, before I select the chisel to show you how I would maintain it, I'll just go through the different types that you might see out there. So, a chisel like this, which has square sides all around, is also known as a 4 chisel. Now 4 chisels are generally used for bulk work, so you're chopping out a mortise or whatever. They're built to take that material, they're built to be hammered. Now, be aware, no ring on the top means only use a wooden hammer, so a mallet of some sort. Ring on the top means you can use a metal hammer, but be careful. So a lot of vintage chisels you buy, particularly of this vintage, will be in this style. The other major style you're going to see is also known as a bevel chisel. Now this is what people recognize as a chisel today. So it's beveled on sides. That allows you to get in close in corners for, let's say, if you're cutting dovetails or that kind of thing. This example is made for hitting with a chisel, but if you look and you see that this bevel is very steep or very flat and the blade is very thin, what you have then, and unfortunately I don't have an example here, is a paring chisel. Now those chisels are not thick here, they don't have any support, and they're only made for paring. You cannot hit them with a hammer. That's very important. And they will often have a fully domed head. That will indicate that you can't hit it with a hammer. Obviously this one has a metal ring, which means it's designed to be hit. But just watch out for that. Just pay attention to how much meat is left and ask the question if you don't know. Like I said, these more modern chisels are all in the bevel chisel category. That's what you would get normally in a shop. Now I happen to like old footprints, old marbles, even old Stanleys from around that era, from the 70s, the 80s, because they're good build quality, they last, and they hold an edge excellently. That doesn't mean that the modern equivalents are the same. I wouldn't buy a modern set of marbles because they have the same problems that most modern chisels have. The steel is not as dense, it doesn't hold an edge as well, and the heat treatment doesn't run the whole way up. So, as an example here, I'm going to go worst case scenario. So this is probably the chisel that is in the worst state of any of them. This is the guy with the big chunk gone off the top. The back is in serious trouble. The handle is covered in crap. Everything is covered in crap. So, if you got one like this, how do you fix it? So I like to start by removing any dross that's on the surface using a scraper. So any paint or loose rust or filler or whatever happens to be on this. This means then that my sandpaper or my sharpening stone or whatever I'm going to use for the next steps don't get clogged up with all that material. So I like to lap the back first. Flatten the back. I just have a piece of marble here. You can get an off-cut of a piece of glass from a glass company. It's important that you have something flat, and I have just double-sided tape, some rough sandpaper for this, and then just going out, go back and forth, for a long time. See there, after a few scrapes, we're starting to get a nice shine there. This is actually pretty flat, so we're doing okay. This does two things. Obviously you need it to be flat for getting a perfect sharp edge, but it also lets you see if there is a dip off this way. You'll start to see the scratches here, no scratches at the front, and it makes the pitting very clean. So then I would want to start working this back. So you can do it like this on a piece of, on a piece of glass or a piece of marble, as long as it's perfectly flat with some sandpaper on it, and then just keep working it backwards and forwards until eventually you wear it back so that that chip is gone. Now this will be your bevel angle, which will be 25 degrees, and you can just spend a couple hours doing this. Now of course you can also use for this an oil stone, the same thing. You just throw oil in, set it back on your bevel, throw on some music. You want to make sure if it's an oil stone that you're working the entirety of the oil stone so you don't scoop it out. You just keep working like that, avoiding creating a hump here, so you want to make sure everything is nice and flat. You could also use one of these. This is a diamond blade or a diamond stone. This one has to be double-sided. You can pick these up for 40 or 50 quid. If you're going to get seriously into doing this kind of work, I'd recommend one of these because they're almost impossible to knock out of true. They last forever. And some of them you can use dry. Some of them you need lapping fluid. My favourite non-lapping fluid, lapping fluid is window cleaner. I'd say window clean, I'm not sponsored, but now you know what I mean. And again, you're just going to take your time. I'm starting on the core side, working till I have that nice and flat at the back. All scratches go to the very edge. And then sitting on my 25 degree, just work it back and work it back till you're past that break and you're at a 90. But I have a lot of work to do here, so I'm going to get a bit of power involved. So this is my dry grinding setup. You can get wet grinders as well, which avoid some of the problems we'll talk about later. On one side here I have a rough stone, on the other side then I have changeable belts. This will help hog out the material, particularly if you have a lot of work to do like on this one. It does require a bit of patience and a bit of learning, but for this kind of work it's vital. That's why if you're getting into this, maybe you have one of these and you want to start doing up your own chisels, get a set that's of the newer type of chisels and get a set that's pretty janky, and then you can just make mistakes and learn that way, and it's not a big deal if you mess it up. So with dry grinding, heat is going to be your enemy. So I will always have a jar of water beside me, and you'll feel as you're going through, once you start feeling the heat in the blade, you want to cool that, because you don't want to do what's known as drawing out the temper. One second, I'll show you. I just zoomed in on this on the table to show you. There, you see that colouring, that bluing in the steel there? That's because it was ground for too long and it got too hot, and that blue colour tells you that the temper has been drawn out. This basically means that the steel is not as hard, which means that it won't hold nearly as well of an edge. So you always want to be careful not to overheat. Now, let's get started. And now it's time for the Norm Abram part of this episode. Be sure to read, understand and follow all the rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools safely will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there's no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. The reason I did that not just because I'm a massive New Yankee Workshop fan, is vitally important. When you're using a grinding situation, what you are doing is you are cutting off tiny little pieces of metal that are becoming superheated. They go into your eyes. That's a bad day. A really bad day. So, zoom in and we'll start doing this. So I want to first grind back this so that we're past the crack where it's broken off, and I go a mil past it. I want to make sure that I'm leaving none of this bad area here. Then we're going to get our protractor here, start grinding it back to get that 25-degree angle, and I'll keep checking against my protractor that I'm maintaining that 25, and we're just going to slowly work it until we have a 25-degree angle all the way across and back. So let's start filming some stuff. And again, keep the water nearby.
This can hog a lot of material off, but you have to remember what you're doing is making a 3-hour piece of work a half-an-hour piece of work. Take your time, keep dipping and cooling. Now, one thing you'll notice there is there's always a little bit of water on the surface. A good indication of when you need to dip is when you start to see that water drawing back and drying out. You also want to keep checking that you're grinding this edge back square, because that will make it a lot easier at the next step when we add the bevel.
So now that we have that square cut back past the damaged part, set our fence here for 25 degrees. So basically when we grind it down, we'll end up at 25 degrees here, and I have my little protractor here that's set at 25, so I can keep checking as I'm going along. Again, same thing applies. Keep it cool. And this part takes a long time to get right, to be able to cut it so that you end up with that straight across and everything is flat. But make mistakes, you'll learn.
Now, as you grind the bevel, you're going to need to dip more often, because the material you're removing, or the material that's top, is actually getting thinner and thinner, so it will take less heat transfer for it ultimately to lose the temper. So this is the time to really be patient and take it slow and careful. If it takes you 20 minutes to just get it down, that's how long it takes. You'll have a chisel for life. Now, I only grind it down until I have about a half a mil of a flat edge showing, because if I go any closer, it's almost impossible not to draw out that temper. So let's skip ahead to when I have that section done.
Now this is obviously exaggerated, but because the stone is round and you grind it down, you're going to actually get a rounded face, a slightly concave face. Now the bigger sharpening stone, obviously the less this is going to be, but what you need to do then is you need to either then get it on the stone and flatten that out, which is fine, or you can just do the honing angle and not worry about this being a slight round. That's a personal preference thing. Now before I do this flattening and sharpening, I'm just going to get a fine sandpaper and clean these up. That's a personal preference thing. I particularly like them showing their age, but I'm showing you how to restore it, and some people like them to look shiny and new. So I'm going to do all this just on the top, just on the bevels, nothing here. I don't want to mess with my flatness in the back. I spent a bit of time, not as much as I showed on camera, I spent a bit of time making sure that was perfectly flat. So I don't want to mess that up. I'll try to get all this junk off of the handle. Indeed, Bettina. Have to agree. So now, let's sharpen this thing.
I have an in-depth video on sharpening and sharpening to a razor's edge, which I will put in the description and in the card above. But now let's get to the part that we all want to see. How sharp did it come out?
So we have it sharpened, but is she sharp? Only one test I know of. Oh, that's just eating hair. That is perfect. So, that's this week's video. Hopefully you've picked up a few tips that you can use if you start getting into buying vintage chisels. And, well, hell, even just fixing your own. So, as always, thank you for staying to the end of the video. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff, and hit that bell icon, and absolutely do try this at home.